We on Fire Sports Podcast, the spot, season number 5, episode number 10 in the wind, man, and we here at the weekend, man, and if it's your first time listening to We on Fire Sports Podcast, the spot, we provide hot fire takes and analysis across the sporting landscape. And if you're OG of the show, we appreciate the check-in as we're here at the weekend. Yeah, it's time to relax, let your head down, unwind, enjoy what we got across the sporting landscape this weekend. And yeah, we're really in the fall now, man. October brings October excitement. You know, we getting closer to Halloween. You know, kids getting better acclimated to school. You know, the weather's kind of changing a little bit, leaves coming out and everything. So this is an exciting time, man. And man, in this episode, we gonna get into National Football League, man, week number 5. You know, last night was very, very interesting. You know, week number 5 kicked off between the Los Angeles Rams and just that whole situation with the San Francisco 49ers last night. Congratulations to Kyle Shanahan and the Niners, able to pull that game out. You know, Sean McVay, you know, scheme up McVay, you know, one of my favorite coaches in the league. You know, down here doing this podcast, man. We down here in the southeast in Georgia. I remember young Sean McVay, quarterback, taking his high school team to the Georgia State Championship. Long time ago, many moons ago, man. But this guy is now, you know, just locked and loaded as a coach. And last night, to me, in my opinion, he made a big-time decision that really kind of cost his team the football game. Those who watched, you know, went into overtime. You know, it was a good back and forth, very entertaining Thursday night football game, man. It was a good game to kind of unwind, get right into, you know, the weekend. And, you know, I commend the National Football League because they've done an outstanding job with the Thursday night football matchups. We all remember when Thursday night football first came, you know, just in the atmosphere of the National Football League. I mean, a game being played every Thursday night, not the special jump-offs. The matchups was horrible. The matchups was terrible. You know, the ratings was terrible, but now, you know, they revamped it, brought in Al Michaels and Kerr Herbstreit, got a primetime appeal to it, so I took my cap to the National Football League in that one. But back to the game, man, I can't blame the Rams for going forward, man, on 4th and 1. You kick a field goal, you tie the game, you could end up in a tie like we saw, you know, last week with the Cowboys and Packers at 40-40 a pop. No, he went for it, but I didn't think running the ball right up the gut to Kyron Williams was the right idea, even though I had Kyron on my fantasy football club. Didn't think it was a good idea to do that. It gets stopped. The game is over. So shout out to the Niners. This is a team that's the walking wounded, but it's a big-time victory for them as they improve the 4-1 on the year for them. So, man, we're going to get into that whole Week 5 slate also, too, man. But, you know, October also brings October playoff baseball and Major League Baseball. And Boy, I was on pins and needles, man, with my Cubbies, man, taking on the San Diego Padres. You know, my Cubs was able to pull a thick game out last night, you know, able to get that wild card in 2-1 victory up in Wrigley Field. The fans was just geeked up. Made me miss home real bad just watching that whole atmosphere, man, up there in Chicago, man, Sheffield and Waverly Avenue, Wrigley Field. But the Cubs move on, man, to the National League Divisional Series, and one of those matchups, man, to quote my man Bart Scott, can't wait. Couldn't wait. You know, this is an NL Central matchup between the Cubs and the Brewers that'll jump off tomorrow, man, on TBS. I'll be locked and loaded in that one, you know, with my Cubs gear on and everything, checking that one out. We'll see what it do with the Brewers. They obviously won the division this season. And so also congratulations to the New York Yankees, able to pull that victory out last night against the Boston Red Sox. You know, they popped champagne and everything. Shout out to Aaron Judge. You know, Aaron Boone, you know, getting that monkey off his back, man, getting this team into the divisional round. They obviously got to the World Series last year. The Yankees did and got embarrassed by the Los Angeles Dodgers. But, you know, there's a lot of pressure up in New York, as always, with the Yankees. So, you know, they was able to move on. They take on the Blue Jays. That game will be played, you know, tomorrow. Also on Fox. Then, you know, we got the Dodgers and the Phillies, man. Dodgers and the Phillies, you know, that's game 1 to be played. I believe that one is going to be on Sunday. Well, no, actually, that game's been played tomorrow, matter of fact, the Dodgers and the Phillies, and also to the Tigers and the Mariners. So we'll get into that whole slate across Major League Baseball, man, but I definitely had to shout it out as now we get into the thick and thin of the Major League Baseball season. Also, we got the WNBA finals, man. Shout out to the ladies. WNBA, Phoenix Mercury taking on the Las Vegas Aces. The Aces got the reigning MVP in Aja Wilson. Congratulations to her once again for winning that award. They're a team that, was hotter than a firecracker. They've been the best team, in the WNBA all season. They definitely going to have their hands full with the Mercury. Also, I want to send congratulations out to the Indiana Fever. This is a team losing Caitlin Clark. They kept the pedal to the metal. Shout out to the head coach of the Indiana Fever. They was a team that did not want to let go of the rope and make excuses because Caitlin Clark wasn't in the building for them being able to play. And so, man, that slate will be jumped off tonight in a few moments. Man, I'll be checking that one out, man. The Mercury and the Aces. I think the Aces, though, I think they're the better team. They got the best player on the floor in Aja Wilson. I think they win this series. But I'm definitely, be sitting back, just enjoying this slate we got tonight, man. The WNBA Finals in Game 1. Speaking of the WNBA, there was a few comments made by Fee Collier. We all know Fee Collier if you follow the WNBA. She's been an outstanding player. MVP finalists this season for her. The Lynx, they got eliminated, didn't get a chance to get to the WNBA finals. And, she made some comments about, Kathy Engel, the commissioner of the WNBA. And it was very, very interesting. And, I made this point, just kind of off wax is what I consider it with a colleague of mine not too long ago, just about the ineptitude of the commissioner of the WNBA. I thought that, she kind of ducked what I consider the necessary heat, especially in a leadership position. And now she's getting called to the carpet. And so it's going to be interesting to see, the collective bargaining agreement in the WNBA is coming down the slate. I think these two parties are probably headed towards some kind of form of a lockout because they're miles apart in just negotiations from a financial standpoint and just how they feel just about, just what's going on in the WNBA from a, front office to, the players, type of situation. So we'll see what that thing do, man. But excited about, game number 1 for the WNBA Finals, man, coming up later on tonight. And also, before we close it out, man, and get into week number 5 across the National Football League and preview that, we got the 50-year anniversary the other day, man, in the Thriller in Manila, man, with my man Muhammad Ali, rest in peace, and Joe Frazier, rest in peace. This is an epic matchup between, two fighters that, they would have fought that one for free, in my opinion. It wasn't about no titles. It was just about, I got to get up 2-1 on you. And to me, when you talk about just robberies across all sports, especially the super OGs, they're going to refer it back to that because that was just, you had the super fight, obviously, the first fight of the century, where Frazier was able to beat Muhammad Ali a 15-round unanimous decision. Then you had the second fight, Ali won. So this third one, the Thriller in Manila, was up. And Muhammad Ali pulled out, a tightly close fight. Joe Frazier, got stopped, towards the end of the fight, man. And it was one of the best, fights and performances I've seen in the history of the sport. So I definitely want to tip my cap to that, man. 50-year anniversary of the Thriller in Manila. And also, before we close it out, we're going to close it out just on a little bit of sad news, man. And my people, man, up there in Syracuse, I already know where I'm going with it. They've had 2 big-time losses, man, from alumni from their universities that have occurred over this last week. The first gentleman, man, this is a gentleman that, I got a chance to watch in the mid-90s, man. All-time leading scorer when he graduated and left Syracuse. And we had the death of my man Lawrence Moulton. Those who all remember, man, number 21 with the Sox. Putting in work, played in the NBA as well, got drafted by the Vancouver Grizzlies, played a couple seasons in the league as well. So, I saw Jim Boeheim, the epic head coach, former head coach of the Syracuse Orange, just saddened because, Moulton is one of the building blocks. I mean, we all know, and some of the younger folks kind of know more so Carmelo Anthony at Syracuse and things like that, but Lawrence Moulton was one of those guys that was one of those foundation bricks along with, Dwayne Pearl Washington and Derek Coleman's of the world and Sherman Douglas of the world. I mean, John Wallace's of the world. This is a program that has had some big-time players over the history of the program. So rest in peace, man, for Lawrence Moulton. And also, too, man, young Arthur Jones. defensive end, played most notably for the Baltimore Ravens, went to Syracuse as well. He's also too famously known as the brother of John Bones Jones of the UFC. Heard that he passed away as well, man, so condolences to both of those gentlemen's families. And, man, coming up, man, we're going to get into week number 5 across the National Football League. Man, first and foremost, I appreciate all the love and the feedback. I appreciate your ear. We on Fire Sports Podcast. That's fire. Welcome back. And yeah, we're going to get into week number 5 across the National Football League. As last week number 4 was more so a week where you want to see teams, kind of separate themselves a little bit. We had a few teams coming into week number 4, 3-0, and teams that was 0-3. And we got a little clarity across the board just for certain teams. And week number 5, to me, really the theme is upset alert. That's the theme for me for week number 5, because there is not, what I call those heavyweight type of matchups we've kind of seen over the first 4 weeks of the season. But I think that week number 5 is more so teams that are trying to kind of get out of the rut. There's a lot of 1-3 teams out here. There's still a few 0-4 teams out here. So, it's definitely interesting to see just either one of those teams in those situations. Are they going to let go the rope? Or we going to see, teams that, definitely kind of fight by them bootstraps, as they would say, to get themselves, back into a legitimate playoff contending, the sun is at the end of the rainbow type of vibe for the season. And so, man, the first game we're going to look at, man, just kind of on that tip is, man, this game is going to be played at 1 o'clock on Fox. Yeah, the Indianapolis Colts taking on the Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders last week, took an L to my Chicago Bears. It was actually a good contested game. Geno Smith last week was a turnover machine against my Bears. The Raiders finally got to see really what Ashton Jeanty was all about at the running back position. I mean, the man was exciting, worthy of that early first round pick for the Raiders. I think that Geno Smith will have better days for the Las Vegas Raiders. I think that the Indianapolis Colts, this is a team that, last week took an L as well, as they was coming into, week number 4 being undefeated. Daniel Jones, the talk of the town in Indianapolis across the National Football League, just the latest, reclamation project as far as a quarterback, moving to a new scenery and just getting his weight up. And so the Colts, to me, this is an interesting game because I think that the Raiders are very thirsty just to try to get a victory on the season for my man Pete Carroll, their second victory of the season if they would win this game. The Colts, to me, playing at home, all the pressure really is on them to try to win this football game. Last week was a situation of where just with the big time blunder, by the fumble, on the goal line, that situation, was really the point difference in the game. So it was a winnable game last week for the Colts. And I think that this week, they'll be back, kind of on their grind a little bit, have their antennas up, just the job that Shane Steichen has done as head coach of the Indianapolis Colts. It's been a good job thus far. I'm liking what I'm seeing from the Colts. They actually basically a touchdown favorite in this game. That's why I said, man, this week the theme is upset special. But I think that the Indianapolis Colts will be able to pull this game out. For me, I think that this is a game that I think the Colts will be able to put up, a hot 24 points. And, I got this one, man, 24-10 for the 24-17. 24-7, because I think the Raiders will be able to score a couple times on the Colts. But I think they pull this one out, and I think that the Colts barely cover the spread on this one. Then we got a game that, to me, both these teams, big markets, one of the biggest fan bases and passionate fan bases across the National Football League. This game will be played at 1 o'clock as well up in East Rutherford, New Jersey. Talking about the New York Football Jets taking on the Dallas Cowboys. Cowboys, fresh off the 40-40 tie. Just with that situation with the Green Bay Packers last week. Dak Prescott playing some good football. I think that, him and them without CeeDee Lamb is still, to me, we got to just kind of wait and see. I think it's a lot of, people across the National Football League who cover it, feel like this offense is, perking and doing well. But I'm like, They still don't have CD Lamb. George Pickens last week was outstanding. 2 touchdowns for Pickens. They was able to run the football with Javonte Williams. So I like what I saw on that front. Their defense is probably the worst defense in the National Football League presently. This is a team that can't stop nothing. The Jets, they looking for their first victory of the year. You got, Aaron Glenn in his first season with the New York Jets. Looking to, get that first victory of the season for them. I feel really bad for the fan base because it's a passionate fan base. Shout out to Fireman. It's just one of those teams that, just can't get right. They brought in Justin Fields from the Pittsburgh Steelers, this season. And, him coming off the mend, off the concussion situation for him. We'll see what he do, just in this football game. I mean, really the spread is a pick 'em. You got Dallas a 1.5 favorite just in this one. I think that this is, to me, upset alert because I think that the New York Jets win this football game. I think the Jets got nothing to lose. I think Aaron Glenn is just a grind out type of guy. He was pissed off last week when they lost. I think that the Jets just show a good effort playing at home. I think that we really going to see just the footprints of the Dallas Cowboys missing CD Lamb in this football game. And so for me, man, I got the Dallas Cowboys losing this game to the New York Jets. I think it's going to be kind of a back and forth type of game, but I got the Jets, winning this game, man, 27-21. I think the Jets defense, mount up a little bit in this football game as well. So, yeah, this is what you can kind of consider an upset special, even though I don't think both of these teams are nowhere sniffing the playoffs this season. But I like the Jets in that one. Then we got a team that is still undefeated out here. Undefeated and still champion. Philadelphia Eagles. The Philadelphia Eagles coming into this week. There's a lot of talk about the whole situation with A.J. Brown. They got a nice little matchup, and I think this might be the best played or best watched game of the week against the Denver Broncos. Denver Broncos 2-2. This is a team that can easily be 4-0 on the year. Easily could be 3-1 on the year, but they 2-2 on the season. And they're playing another road game, man. The Broncos are 0-2 on the road so far this season. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, is that A.J. Brown, the whole talk with that. And the Philadelphia Eagles, man, they're just trying to win football games. I think the bigger story in Philadelphia is just them not being able to run the football with Saquon Barkley like they want. But, teams are going to stack up and scheme up. That's why, to me, it's a mystery why I don't see the Eagles trying to push the ball downfield more. And I'm not saying that from a perspective that, hey, I got A.J. Brown on my fantasy football team. It's just you got Devontae Smith over there. You got weapons, on the outside, be able to feast when teams kind of load up the box a little bit on Saquon Barkley. And I'm just a little bit surprised so far this season that the Eagles really haven't capitalized on it. I don't think that the offense has been as imaginative as, what they would like up there in Philadelphia. So I think that, to me, this is a big game from a perspective of, for Philadelphia, they just been, just winning, what we call winning the fights. Going to decisions and really having, did a little knockout blow type of situation, even though that block kick, win was huge for them just from a theatrical standpoint. But I think that the Broncos, they're going to come into this football game with a stout defense. And if the Eagles don't get their weight up, they can definitely get knocked off. And I'm leaning towards Bo Nix and the Denver Broncos traveling up to Philadelphia and get the win. The Eagles is basically a 4.5 point favorite in this football game. And I got to still ride with the Eagles because I think that they can win ugly and they can win a game where, say, if the Broncos come out a little bit hot early in the game, I think that the Eagles are still good enough to settle themselves down and be able to handle their business. I do think this game is going to be a one-possession football game, and I do think this game is going to come down to the end. But I got the Philadelphia Eagles winning this football game, man, 28-24. I think that, the Eagles, this is a big litmus test from an offensive standpoint because they're playing a stout defensive unit in the Denver Broncos, man. So we'll see, if the Eagles will be able to, get their offense together and pull out another victory and remain undefeated on the season. Another game that's catching my eye, week number 5. This is a game, two teams in the AFC. This is a game really between two teams that, we had this conversation coming into the season, maybe even a year ago. We wouldn't believe that both these teams would be 1-3 on the year. Breaking news came out, earlier, just a few moments ago, that Lamar Jackson will not be playing in this game. And yeah, I'm talking about the Baltimore Ravens taking on the Houston Texans down in Baltimore. The Texans as well. This is a team that is winless on the road this season. 0-2 so far. It's their third road game in the first 5 weeks of the season for them. I think that the offensive line for the Houston Texans is straight up trash. I don't think that C.J. Stroud is, a lot of people kind of blame the sophomore or third year slump. And part of it is that. But part of it is that I think this guy got shaky legs back there, throwing the football just simply based on the fact that the offensive line is worth nothing so far. Now, the defense is still, DeMarco Ryans, head coach of the Houston Texans. I think that the defense is still, caliber defense with Stingley. You got Will Anderson out there. You got Hunter out there on the defensive line. So I like the defense from the Houston Texans. I just think that the offense, especially you got Woody Marks back there in the backfield now. He's a young player that you still got to see about a little bit. And the Ravens, this is I'm almost finna put the dead man walking label on this football team because I'm going to keep it all the way 100. This might be their season right here because I just don't think you can go 1-4 in the AFC and be able to get yourself up out of that hole. And, Cooper Rush, we seen Cooper Rush quarterback, we seen him down in Dallas, he's been in Baltimore for 2 seasons now. He's got to play some good football. And, his first, crack at it is against a stout defensive team, a team that, got some athleticism on the back end of their defense. And the front seven, is stout pretty much as well. And so I don't know about this one. Houston actually is a 1.5 point favorite in this football game. As we all know, man, that's Vegas Swahili for a pick'em. And so I'm kind of with this one on that one. But I'm going to take the Houston Texans because I don't think that the Baltimore Ravens, one, their defenses are walking wounded. Matabuke is out for the season. You got various injuries. And now with your quarterback on the, on the men and Lamar Jackson with the hamstring injury. And so I just think that for some teams, you can be as talented as you want to be. But in the National Football League, it's this thing called luck. And right now, the luck is not on the side of the Baltimore Ravens. I got the Houston Texans winning this football game. I got the Texans winning this one 27-17. Houston go down to Baltimore and pull off that victory. Now we're going to transition to the NFC. And these are two teams that, what you can kind of consider in the tier 2 level, say, of the NFC. You got the Tampa Bay Bucks taking on the Seattle Seahawks. And the Bucks, they was this close for coming back and trying to knock off the Philadelphia Eagles last week. Baker Mayfield continuously still putting on the cape for the Tampa Bay Bucks, even though he had a turnover in that game. I ain't gonna say it cost him the game, but the Bucks, their defense looking real good. Now they starting to get some of them weapons back with Chris Godwin back. I'm not sure what's going on with Mike Evans. It'll probably be a couple weeks before Mike come back into the fold. Bucky Irvin is nicked up in this game. It looks like it's 50-50 whether or not Bucky Irvin is going to play in this football game, which is looking like he's not going to play. The Seahawks, this is a team that has been playing some real good defense through the first month of the season. I've been thoroughly impressed with them on the defensive side. I just think that, McDonald, the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks, he's put this team in a situation to where they've been sneaky good this year. Sam Darnold, he hadn't came out of the box like he did, say, in Minnesota statistically with the Seattle Seahawks this season. But he's a guy that's still kind of remaining solid. Kenneth Walker looked like he's a little bit healthy in this football game as well for Seattle. Can't forget about JSN, for the Seattle Seahawks as well. Looks like he's extending up a little bit. And this is a long travel distance from the Tampa Bay Bucks, traveling way basically on the other side of the country, take on the Seattle Seahawks. And this is a home field for the Seahawks. Has been at Lumen Field, has been just epic over the last, say 15 plus years, man. Just a good environment and one of the best environments across the National Football League. With this one, man, I'm going to lean towards the home team. I just think that with Bucky Irvin being nicked up for the Tampa Bay Bucks, that's a huge loss for them. I think that, for them traveling across the whole country, I just think that I don't think they'll be able to pull this one out. But you never know. Todd Bowles's done an outstanding job so far for the Tampa Bay Bucks, especially over the last 2 seasons for them. And, I'm riding with Baker. I'm a Baker fan now. But this is a little bit too big enough off the chew for them. I think that the Seattle Seahawks will win this football game in a thriller. I think this game is going to be 28-26. I got the Seattle Seahawks winning this football game and also to improving the 2-1 at home. So in that clip, so that's what I think about that one. And man, before we close it out, we're going to get into, just the Sunday night football game. We got the Buffalo Bills taking on the New England Pats. This is what you can call the revenge game for Stephon Diggs. He travels back to Buffalo. He just had a tumultuous exit with the Buffalo Bills. And the Patriots, this is a team with Drake May looking good so far this year. 7 touchdowns and 2 interceptions so far for Drake May this season. They're extending up. It looks like Diggs is finally kind of getting comfortable now just from an offensive standpoint. The defense with Mike Vrabel, they're going to be a play hard type of defense. But the Buffalo Bills, man, they knocking out anything they can see right now. And this is a football team, even though Josh Allen has been the guy that's worn the cape for this team. They got some injuries too. Big Ed Oliver, defensive tackle for the Buffalo Bills. And that defense, to me, in my opinion, the past 2 weeks, they really haven't been playing, what I call Buffalo Bill type of football, what Sean McDermott want to see out of his defense. I think that the offense, I said it before, I like Josh Allen being the guy. Shout out to James Cook. He's been outstanding this year. I just think that I want to see a little bit more from Coleman and just the other weapons they got on the wide receiver front for the Buffalo Bills. But I got them winning this football game. Spread is 7.5 on this one. I think Buffalo do cover, man. I just think they just, got the eye on the sparrow right now for them. I think they win this football game, man. 31-14. I got the Bills winning this one on Sunday Night Football. And then week number 5, it wrapped itself up, man, with the Kansas City Chiefs. This is a team that's got themselves, off the ground and, back up now. 2-2 on the year. Big time victory, last week against the Baltimore Ravens. That was huge up in Arrowhead. Taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars. Shout out to Duval County. This game would be played down in Jacksonville. Cohen, the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. This team is 3-1 on the year. And this is a team that's 3-1, and Trevor Lawrence hadn't played his best football. Their passing offense has been straight anemic so far. Travis Hunter's been sprinkling in there just a little bit, but he hasn't been, just what they've been expecting so far. I'm not sure if that's the play call and them just trying to kind of take it easy with him. Brian Thomas Jr., he hadn't really came out the box, running top speed so far this season for them. And, ETN, he's had a good year so far. Travis Etienne, he's had a good year so far. So this is an interesting game for me. I think for the Chiefs, this is still a big-time game. Because even though, they got themselves to 2-2 on the year, this is an AFC matchup. And for them to be able to get kind of back to their swag, waiting on Rashid Rice to come back also, too, just on the offensive front. I like what I saw from Patrick Mahomes last week, throwing 4 touchdowns in that Baltimore game. And I think that they need to keep it up. Kansas City is 3.5-point favorite in this football game. But I actually got the Jacksonville Jaguars taking this one. I think that the offense for the Jaguars is no way but up. I think that the defense for the Kansas City Chiefs, they played good last week, but I still think it's more to be desired from the defensive standpoint. I don't think that Patrick Mahomes will throw 4 touchdowns this week. Not knocking Patrick Mahomes. I just don't think that he's going to throw for 4 TDs in this game. I think that the Jacksonville Jaguars play good enough defense to steal this one. I think it's going to come down to the end as well. In my upset special, I got the Jacksonville Jaguars winning this football game, man, 27-21. And that's going to close out, man, week number 5 across the National Football League. My look at it. Coming up, man, before we get out of here, man, we're going to wrap things up across the sport landscape. I'm also, too, going to hit you guys with my Big 5, another installment of my Big 5 QBs through the first 4 weeks of the season. Definitely that's going to be a treat, and guys, and check that out. And first and foremost, man, I appreciate all the love and the feedback. I appreciate you. Yeah. We on Fire Sports Podcast. Man, welcome back. And before we close it on out, man, we're going to get into this Big Five, man. My NFL Big Five quarterbacks across the National Football League so far through the first 4 weeks of the season. And this is not what I consider my overall top five rankings of quarterbacks in the, in the NFL, because, we got the big time guys, a lot of them hurt. Lamar Jackson not playing on Sunday. We got Jaden Daniels coming back into the fold for the Washington Commanders on Sunday. He's been out. You got Burrow obviously out up in Cincinnati. So there's been a lot of what I call prime and kind of upper tier quarterbacks that's been, out on the mend. So, let's go twist the list up maybe a little bit. But, we're going to get straight into it, man. At number 5, man, I got my man A-Rod, Aaron Rodgers at number 5, Pittsburgh Steelers. This is a team that's 3-1 so far this season. They've been playing some real good football, keeping it short and sweet, keeping them out of trouble. I don't think the defense is, still ascending to the levels of we know what the Pittsburgh Steelers are capable of doing. But, so far, man, 3-1, Mike Tomlin, this is a guy that will win you regular season football games. Not sure what it would be, later on in the season, but so far I'm liking what I'm seeing from A-Rod, man. I got him coming in at number 5. At number 4, Baker touchdown maker, man. I got my man Baker Mayfield coming in at number 4, man. Just the job he's done with the Tampa Bay Bucks so far this season. They lost a nail biter against the Philadelphia Eagles last week. Block, kick, touchdown situation, which was crazy. But Baker, he's just been putting this whole organization on his cape, on his back. Superman cape style, almost came back last week in the second half. I just like the grit and the determination from Baker, man, what we seen, just in this whole 10 years so far down in Tampa. And so I got him coming in at number 4, man. At number 3, this is a guy that I've been a little critical of, not from him just personally, just from his team and his offense. They've been kind of stuck in the mud, and they finally got themselves really out of the mud last week. And I'm talking about Patrick Mahomes, man. 4 touchdowns last week against the Baltimore Ravens. We all know Baltimore defense is not up to snuff right now, but it was good to see Worthy back on the field and see this offense get a little bit more creative. Patrick looked like he had that gleam last week. He knew what type of matchup it was going against Lamar Jackson. And so, not sure how far Kansas City gonna go so far this season, but I got Patrick Mahomes, man, coming in at number 3 so far. At number 2, man, I got my man Dak Prescott coming in at number 2 now. This is one of them situations where I don't think the Dallas Cowboys is, going to the Super Bowl and none of that, but Dak been playing some good football, man, with CeeDee Lamb out, he'll be back probably in a couple weeks, but he been holding it down. George Pickens had a good week last week, 2 touchdowns. They still got a couple little pieces running the ball good, with Javonte Williams. But Dak, I like the leadership and I like his ability, to just keep Dallas kind of rolling a little bit offensively until maybe the defense might wake up one day. We'll see what that do. So I got Dak coming in at number 2. And at number 1, man, this is a guy last week, man. I'm not sure what happened up in New York, man, against the New York Giants. And yeah, we talking about Justin Herbert, the Chargers. I just think that for me overall, Harbaugh taking the training wheels off of Herbert. Not saying that he needed training wheels, but this offense has got a little bit, more electric now, with Johnston and Keenan Allen, putting in work for them. So I'm liking what I'm seeing, just from a spread out standpoint for the Chargers, and Herbert, running the football, look like he's healthy. So I got him coming in at number 1, man. So I'm not sure how long he can stay on my QB Big 5 rankings across the National Football League. So we'll see what that do. We'll be back on another one probably next week sometime. So, man, before we get out of here, man, I appreciate, man, everything, all the love and the feedback, man. We right back at you, man, coming up at the top of the week. But first, before we get up out of this, boy, I want to wish you guys a great weekend, man. Definitely be safe. Enjoy yourself. Let your head down, man. Enjoy what we got across the sporting landscape. We on Fire Sports Podcast.